Supercharged, a podcast focusing on renewable energy and the passion behind the movement. Supercharged is a thoughtful journey through renewable energy sustainability and an integrated lifestyle. Subscribe and listen each week as we chat with thought leaders, influencers, and those who simply choose to live a better way. And hopefully, along the way, you too will be inspired to live supercharged. This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Supercharged, and I have an incredible guest today, Jarryd Salem. Jarryd, thank you for joining us on Supercharged, the podcast.
My absolute pleasure to be with you again, Kevin. It's great to see you.
Hey, it's good to catch up with you. I guess it's been a little over a year since the last time we chatted, but like I said off camera, I've kind of kept up with you on the socials, and man, you lead an exciting life. That's all I got to say. And even with lockdown, I mean, the things that are happening. So, man, I don't even know where to start, but just introduce yourself. Like you and I were at a networking event. How would you introduce yourself to me?
Oh, thanks for the kind words at the beginning. Yeah, it's been an exciting life. But if I was at a networking event, I guess I would jump on in. My name's Jarryd. I'm from Sydney in Australia, and I've been very fortunate that I spent the last 13 years, more or less, traveling full time around the world. Whole bunch. I haven't actually kept track of number of countries we've been to, along with my wife Alesha, but it's been quite a lot, and we've been on some amazing adventures. And over the years, started off as a ski bum, and now moved into a full-time digital nomad, running a couple of online businesses, which managed to keep us on the road. So life has been fantastic, and I guess that's kind of me. And then a whole bunch of different adventures thrown in along the way as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, there is one exciting story that I want to touch on real quick, so I won't forget, because I'm an old man and, sometimes the memory goes, but man, tell our listeners the story about moving to the island.
So last year we came back to Australia, just right before COVID hit. It just was quite fortunate that the way flights worked and everything, we just so happened to be here in Australia when everything got locked down. And we ended up buying a camper van, and once restrictions eased a little bit here in New South Wales, where Sydney is in Australia, we hit the road, went travelling, purely because we had nowhere else to be. We don't have a home. We've been nomadic for 13 years or 12 years at that point. And so we just packed up the van and hit the road, working on the way, and just having a great time, similar to what we've always done, just traveling around. And we ended up on this magical little island called Magnetic Island. It's in the Great Barrier Reef, just off of Townsville. And our wedding celebrant actually reached out just out of the blue, hadn't spoken to her since we got married, so 4 years, hadn't spoken to her at all. She just dropped us a message on social media one day and said, "Oh, if you ever happen to be going past this island, with my husband and I just bought a house there, but we're stuck in another part of the country. We can't get there. You guys are more than welcome to go and house sit for a while." So that's what we did. It was just like perfect timing. We just so happened to be 1 hour away from the island, took the van over there, parked up, and spent a month just chilling and hanging out on the island, and fell in love with it. And after about 2 weeks of us being there, we were just like, this island is magical. It ticks all the boxes that we've ever thought about where we could live, eventually settle down. And so we ended up buying a little block of land there, about 1,000 square meters. I'm not quite sure what that equates to in square feet, unfortunately. Sorry, about 1/4 acre.
And there you go.
And ended up, buying a block of land there. And now we're building a little tiny home, not too tiny, but like a little small home, eco-friendly, sustainable home there on the island.
And is it going to be like completely off grid?
Not yet. Where we are, we're not legally allowed to be fully off-grid, but we are going to try to make ourselves as self-sustainable as possible. So we've got our own septic system going in. We're going to be doing solar power, and eventually, a home battery once they become a little bit more affordable here in Australia. We're going to have water tanks and all that, but we still technically have to be connected to the grid.
And I knew when I reached out to you, I've got to get him on the podcast, because I knew that you would be such a good guest and have such a unique insight and perspective on so many of these issues. But let's drill down just a little bit, and let's talk about, just the whole idea around sustainability. I know that you guys have thought a lot about that. You care a lot about that, and you kind of committed your lives in so many ways to issues around that. But how would Jarryd, how does Jarryd define sustainability?
Kevin, it's a quite a broad topic, right? And the way I feel about sustainability is obviously you have the environmental impacts of what we all do in our day-to-day lives, and whether that's, the amount of waste we produce, or the diets we choose to have, or the way we, commute to and from work, all these kind of little things that add up to increasing your carbon footprint, or ideally decreasing it, and just making small choices along the way so that you can try to minimize your environmental impact as you're going. The other way I think about sustainability, though, is also what you're contributing to local communities. And as travelers, full-time travelers, that's something that has been a big part of our lives while we've been moving around the world. Obviously, being in beautiful nature has taught us to care more about the environment. And so we minimize our waste where we can, and we're very, very cautious about, how much of an impact we have. But one thing I found that with sustainability was also not just the impacts on the environment, but impacts on local communities. So when you're traveling to, little villages in Asia or South America, where tourism can have a huge beneficial part on the livelihoods of people there, on the economy and society, to me, that's all part of sustainability too. And it's not necessarily related to the environment, but it's about improving everyone's lives.
Right.
And just like you've got your other podcast, Rising Tides, right? Like, it's about trying to elevate entire communities, everyone around you. And that does end up having a big impact on environment everywhere you go as well.
So has that kind of been your ethos, since you started traveling? Have you kind of had that idea in mind since you first went on the road?
I wish I could say that was true, but no. When I first left Australia, when I was 20 years old and moved to Canada, being a sustainable traveler was not something I even knew was a thing back then. I was just young and partying, and I wasn't going around trashing the place. That's definitely not the case, but it was not something I really thought about. And it was only really, very fortunate to live in the mountains of Canada for a couple of years, and just really started to get in tune with how beautiful the environments there are, and seeing the impact of things like climate change and over development in certain places. It wasn't something that I sought out to educate myself on, but it was just from being around that it eventually started to shape the way that my mind was thinking. And then when my wife Alesha and I went to Central America and started backpacking a little bit more and getting deeper into local cultures and communities, and then seeing firsthand what over consumption of plastics and things like that were having an impact on the environment. It was only after a couple of years that it started to come to the forefront of my mind and the way that I was acting when I traveled. So now it's a huge part of who we are and the way that we structure our lives. But in the early days, no, it came about through just observations and being around places that were being affected by environmental impacts.
So how would you say, once the kind of the proverbial light bulb came on, so how would you kind of depict that it changed the way you lived at home, the way you conducted your business, just all aspects of life? So what were some of the impacts and some of the specific changes that you made at that time?
I think that there was a turning point. There is one specific moment which I think started to change and affect the way that we do certain things in our lives. And we're on an island called Utila off of Honduras, really popular for scuba diving. And we were staying in this beautiful little cabin there, having a great time. And we went out the back to do some exploration, I guess, from the property, and we came across the island tip, the dump, the rubbish location. And because they don't have rubbish that goes anywhere off the island. There's not ships that pick it up. There's no recycling plants. And so all of the rubbish from the entire island just got thrown in the middle of it. And I didn't know that was a thing. Stumbled across it, and just seeing these huge piles of rubbish, plastic water bottles and straws, and just a million things, right? And we're on this island to go scuba diving and to really enjoy the beautiful ecosystems that were around the island. Seeing that in the middle really kind of shook us. So it was about from that point that we started doing things like not buying plastic water bottles is often, in some places you don't really have an option,
Right.
but, because of drinking water. But so we ended up getting metal water bottles and using those instead. And then we started to have a little bit more a conscious thought pattern around what we were buying and how we were consuming products. And over time that has kind of evolved. And now we have, I got one right here, of, just a reusable water bottle that we use all the time, no matter where we're going. We travel with our own cutlery now. We travel with our own coffee cups, reusable coffee cups. And that one moment in Honduras was kind of a turning point for us, and it changed completely everything we do, even right down to the fashion that we wear. Not that we're fashionable people by any means, but choosing brands that do focus more on sustainability and using eco-friendly products and recycled products. So it has now kind of consumed us, but it's not even something we really think about all that often anymore. It just kind of comes naturally to us, which is a good position to be in, I think.
I mean, you brought up such a great point about, just how landlocked islands are, or how I guess isolated islands are, that, they produce rubbish, they produce trash to get rid of. And without these like container ships coming and taking trash away and, unfortunately, maybe even dumping it in the middle of the ocean somewhere, just because of, financial, advantages or whatever. But so what do islands do, with the just the piles and piles of trash that they have? I mean, are they trying to bury it? Are they trying to burn it? Is it just kind of sit there? I mean, you've traveled so many places. I mean, I'm thinking, some of these poorer areas of South America or Southeast Asia or whatever would have these issues.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because having grown up in Australia, where we live in a beautiful country, and things like recycling and separating your rubbish is just second nature. It's just something that we've always done, right? But it's not really something that you pay much attention to. Your rubbish goes in the bin, your recycles go in the yellow bin, and then your green products, your compost and things like that go in the green bin, and then it just gets taken away. It just disappears, and no one ever thinks about it, right? We just assume that it's going somewhere and it's going to be taken care of. And when you live in somewhere like Australia or the UK or the US or Canada, where there are the stronger economies that can invest in recycling and looking after waste, then you just kind of assume that everything's going to be normal and everything will be looked after. And if they're going to recycle, if they say they're going to recycle it, that's what happens. But then you go to some of these other islands or other countries where their economies might not be in a position where they can invest into, how they produce their waste and how they recycle. And it's not through any fault of the people there, but they just have, they're producing the same amount of rubbish, or in often cases, a lot less rubbish than what we do in our day-to-day lives. But they don't have, a magical truck that just comes and picks it up and takes it away.
And it just disappears.
It just disappears, like, so when we're on that island off of Honduras, that was the first time we'd ever seen that, where they come and collect the rubbish and then they just dump it in the middle. And what else are they really going to do with it? The alternative is to dump it in the ocean, because governments aren't investing into taking it away and breaking it down and things like that. And over the years, we've seen a lot of places that just bury the rubbish or burn it. They might just put a pile. Sometimes there are places where they don't even have waste collection, so the people in communities just burn their own rubbish. And again, there's nothing to. It's not that these people don't care about the environment. Of course they do. They just live in places where they don't have these
they don't have a good alternative. That's exactly right. That's exactly
it is kind of interesting where if there's not ships coming to go just pick up all your rubbish and then go and dispose of it properly, what else do you do with it, right? It is a strange situation.
It is a very, very difficult resolution that I certainly don't have an answer for. But I mean, we traveled, quite a bit and been to a number of different places and just seen, what an impact on just the local community that rubbish can have. I mean, it affects the water sources, it affects the sanitation, affects health. I mean, there's so many, it's just kind of knock-on effect, of so many things that even nutrition. I mean, just over and over and over again, we've seen the adverse effects of just not having a good system to get rubbish removed. But I'm really curious. So you talked about the camper van. I mean, I've got in my mind that you're going to run it off cooking oil, or it's going to be an electric van or something like that. I said, I mean, as far as transportation, I mean, how have you, kind of thought through this, same process as how how you get from place to place?
Uh, with our camper van, we have looked into converting it over to like vegetable oil and running it, electrical if we can. But unfortunately, the position we're in is not something we can do. So
Mm-hmm.
what we do is we just drive really slow. We travel really slow. We don't try to put as many kilometers in a day as we can, which isn't ideal. At the end of the day, we're still burning fossil fuels and we're still working through, rubber on our tires and all that kind of stuff. But we really try to slow it down. And that's something we've also done all around the world. We try to minimize our flights. We always travel by land if we can. We always take public transport where we
Mm-hmm.
can, or walk or bicycles or things like that. So in terms of transport for us, that's a huge part of our carbon footprint when we're traveling. And those are the kind of ways that we've found to try to minimize that. And the other thing we do is we offset all of our carbon that we accumulate through travel. We calculate all that, and then we pay to offset that through a registered charity that plants trees and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, with the camper van, as much as I would love for it to be an electrical vehicle, and maybe in the future we can get that. They're putting up chargers all around Australia at the moment, which is quite cool. But at the moment, it's not the right way to be going about it. Just where we are in this isolated little part of the country.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and I know that as you guys have traveled, and I know you work on the road as you do travel as well. But do you also do? I mean, is there any opportunities for education? I mean, do you actually have any speaking gigs while you're traveling, and blog articles, seminars, webinars, whatever you're doing? I mean, and is it related to? I mean, is it as narrowly focused as ecotourism, or is it just kind of, how to travel, be a digital nomad, more broadly? What exactly are you focusing on?
We do present at conferences, and we've spoken at a bunch of different events around the world, primarily focused on the tourism aspect of sustainability. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not qualified enough to really dive deep into the environmental impacts. There are people out there who are way better at that than us and who have done a lot more research than us, and we leave that kind of stuff to the pros. But what we do have a lot of experience in is the way that sustainability has impacts on tourism, especially in smaller, less visited parts of the world. And so that is something that we consult on. We've spoken at conferences about ecotourism, sustainable tourism, responsible travel, how to be a responsible traveler, and also how to promote tourism in places where that kind of investment coming from travelers, whether it's within the country or from overseas, can really help benefit local communities. So that is something that we do speak about quite a fair bit. And then on our website, we have a whole section dedicated to sustainable tourism, and we're growing that hub out of information. So it is talking a bit more about community-based tourism, how to choose eco-friendly accommodation and things like that. It's a huge part of what we do, and we are trying to grow that as well.
I'll make sure in the show notes when this goes live, I'll make sure that your website link is in the show notes, that specifically to that, ecotourism links or whatever. But if you were going to point, a novice in a direction for as resources are concerned, or tech, apps, whatever, what would be a couple of resources that you would say, hey, this will really help you kind of take these next steps?
So when I read that question, I was quite curious, because it made me realize I don't actually know of any websites or resources that I turn to regularly to keep up to date with that kind of information. So in my own experience, I've never had a website or a book or anything that I keep turning to. But instead, what I tend to do is I just pay more attention to the people I follow on social media, or the websites that we do read, or the people that we're meeting on the road. and trying to get an understanding of how people are incorporating sustainability into their own lives. So it's not necessarily that there's a resource. For me, what I would just recommend people do is just start thinking about your environmental impact or about your impact on local communities and tourism just before you start traveling or before you start, building a home or things like that. And if you show a little bit of an interest, you might end up moving down a certain path. Like you might become really involved with things like for us, we're building a home right now, so like we're getting really involved in what kind of recycled materials we can use in terms of construction materials. And so there wasn't necessarily like one website that we went to. It was just as we were moving forward with the plans for our home, we became interested in that and we started focusing on that. And it was very similar with the way we got involved in community-based tourism. It was purely by being in small communities and seeing firsthand the effects that tourism would have on these communities and how they were helping boost economies that it started to show an interest for us. So I couldn't point your listeners and your viewers to a particular website or an app, unfortunately, but I would just say if they are interested, just to start researching a little bit, and things will come to you as you go. And you might find that you do focus a little bit more on how to minimize your plastic use, for example. And then once you start going down that path, there is a whole bunch of different resources out there, or there's a million and one things you can dive into with sustainability. And it all comes down to what each person will get individually interested in, I think.
I actually thought when you first started answering that question, I thought you were going to say, I just look at nature, mate. I mean, I just walk through a small village in South America and I know what to do, based on what I see around me and a sense around me, the whole life. Sometimes that's the best resource is just open your eyes,
I could not agree more with you, Kevin. It is true. You go for a walk in a forest, and if you just like stop, sit down on the ground or on a log, and you just sit there and you breathe in the air and you look around, you listen to the bird sounds, like that is the number one motivator to help you cut down your environmental impact, like being surrounded by pristine nature. No, that's a great point right there. The best resource we have is the world that we already live in.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning, people that you follow on social media or, just other resources that, you've kind of, been led to kind of as you're doing research, deeper and deeper on the net type sort of thing. But tell me if you are going to guide our listeners, and we're all novices other than you guys here, then, we're kind of sitting here, it's a seminar. So what would be like one or two things that we could do tomorrow to really get started that you think would be pretty impactful?
To keep it just simple and start in your home, because that's probably the easiest way. Just trying to really minimize your waste when you can. So if you cook a lot at home, having a compost bin, so that you, instead of throwing all your food waste into the normal bin, it goes into a compost bin, and then you can throw that in the garden if you're lucky enough to live in a place where you do have a garden, or even if you have a few pot plants or something, you can try to compost and create fertilizer and stuff that way. Watching what you buy from the supermarkets. So if you are buying fruit and vegetables, instead of using the little plastic bags that people throw all their stuff in, what we do is we either just carry it loose and throw it all in a basket and then weigh it at the end, and then it all goes in the same bag. Or you can get these little mesh bags that are reusable, and that minimizes your plastic use. And then using reusable water bottles and keep cups and things like that to remove the reliance on single-use plastic. So those are just very simple things that you can do at home. And what we find, like where we are, we have our magical truck that comes and collects the rubbish every week, and we only use one little small bag every week of rubbish, and most of that is just from all the cooking we do. We don't really use too much waste, and that's just kind of been a ongoing education for us and learning what to choose. And then once you start traveling as well, or hitting little things like walking instead of driving, it all seems quite small, and it's very easy to say, one little people might think that one small little change isn't going to have a big impact on the world, but it's not true. If we are all doing that, if everyone is just changing their mind frames, and you're never going to get everything perfect. And that's another thing to keep in mind, is no one is absolutely perfect at being, zero waste or being the world's best sustainable traveler. We're not all striving to become perfect. We're all just trying to make little impacts and little changes in our lives. And over the years and decades, we'll all get a little bit better at it. And it's like compound interest for the environment, right? Just every little part that we all can do now is just going to help result in the future generations having a better environment for them.
Mate, I could not have asked you to wrap this up any better than that last statement you made. And I made a note, just kind of like, small changes, big impact, just the whole idea of just, starting small, doing something, but, collectively it can have a huge impact. Is there anything that we haven't chatted about you just kind of wrap us up with today? And then maybe right after, just tell people where the best place to find you online, you and Alesha.
Well, the best place to find us online, so our main website's called NOMADasaurus, nomadasaurus.com, and then that's our social media handle for everything, just NOMADasaurus on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. We also do digital marketing, and Peak Evolution Media is our company for that. We have a van life blog as well, so we're very easy to find online. If you Google our names, we'll pop up everywhere. But that's probably the easiest place to find us. And the other thing I'd love to encourage your listeners and your viewers to do is, if they have their own ideas, like, please let us know, like comment on social media, like on your channels and our channels as well, because we've been sustainable travelers for over a decade now, and we're still learning new things every single day. And just even if people who are listening to this conversation have one or two little things that they can take away, I'm sure that yourself, Kevin, and me can take things away from your listeners as well. So I'll just encourage everyone to, if they've got their own little advice or own little tips, share it with all of us. Find us on social media or find us through our, through your podcast, and let everyone know, because it's these little bits of education and little things that, maybe after 10 years, 13 years of us traveling, someone will come to us with their own idea and it changes the way we think. It's not something we'd ever thought about before. And that's what I would encourage everyone out there to do as well. Don't be afraid to share your own tips and advice with everyone. You don't have to always turn to the gurus or to the biggest websites or YouTube channels. Like, everyone's got their own ideas and impacts as well. I think that's quite an exciting thing.
And if you haven't heard all the different intersections in this conversation, then you listeners, you just haven't been listening, because, man, it's from so many different angles, from the ecotourism side to, the small imprint or small footprint, I guess, the digital nomad, minimalist, just everything that's wrapped up in how you guys are living life today. I mean, it's really an inspiration to us, and it's kind of fun to watch, from a distance. And man, I just really appreciate you taking the time today, and please say hello to Alesha for me. And just thanks again for really just sharing your heart, sharing your life, your ethos, and really the why behind how you live the way you live. Jarryd, thanks again, man.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to eventually going for a hike one day in the beautiful nature around where you guys live as well.
Welcome anytime.
Thanks very much.